Sheila, so I want to start by just sort of setting the tone. In my caregiving experience, right? Um, my wife and we became caregivers at virtually the same time. My mom with Alzheimer's disease, my father-in-law with Lewy body dementia. And our caregiving experiences followed the same path. And yes, we were supporting each other. We were together in it. So we weren't isolated per se as individuals. But I have vivid memories of being on the couch trying to watch TV or doing something next to my wife, and we're both like, thinking caregiving stuff, doing caregiving stuff. We're doing it together, but still feeling lonely, right? So
Mm,
not isolated, but still lonely.
right.
Is there a difference? There must be, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Between isolation
totally.
and loneliness.
And that's exactly, you hit it right on the head because, we hear this too in people who live in big cities. You could live in Manhattan and feel lonely. So loneliness really is a feeling. It's a perceiving this sense of being alone even when you're not. And different than isolation, which is like literally isolating yourself and you're not connected with people. So that rings true, I think, for a lot of caregivers feeling lonely. And I think a lot of it has to do with feeling misunderstood. You're in this new role and you feel alone.
Right, right. So if I'm picking up what you're putting down there properly, um, so isolation is sort of more objective. It's like you're not connected with people or
Hmm.
supports as
Hmm.
for caregivers.
Yep,
Whereas loneliness is more of it's as you're saying feeling it's subjective. It's almost
absolutely.
like a an emotional experience or a feeling.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's it.
Okay. Um, and that explains a lot for me based on what the scenario I was describing back in the earlier stages of my wife Lindsay and I's caregiving experience. So, okay. So now that we have that established, what I thought we'd do is, because we're always trying to be focused on the practical here in these sessions. So I'd like to take a look at or talk a little bit about some of the common causes, right? I mean, I think there are a bazillion causes, could be a bazillion causes of both isolation and loneliness. Want to discuss the potential impacts because they're real. This is why we're talking about this. We're talking about this topic because it's prevalent among so many caregivers. Not all, of course, but many. Uh, but it also has it can have real consequences
Hmm.
in lots of different ways. So I want to talk about that. And then, of course, we want to talk about ways anyone who's on in the session today who might be isolated or feeling lonely can cope, can sort of navigate that, right? How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. So do you want to, what are some of well, I guess one caveat here, a couple of caveats actually. Sorry, I can't help myself. First and foremost, you know, like many of these conversations, we're all adults here. We know on face value, what loneliness is and what isolation is, right? Like we know what those words mean. And so I guess that's obvious, but it just, when you're in the midst of the caregiving experience, when you're in those caregiving weeds, it can be hard to see, as my grandmother used to say, that forest through the trees, right? Like
Yeah.
it's hard to sort of at some points when you're in the middle of all it, put your finger on what's happening around you or not in certain cases. That's number one. And that's also to say that like we recognize that not on a lot of these calls it's not like we're espousing rocket science and like this fancy knowledge, right? These are things that in a lot of cases like in under quote unquote normal circumstances, i.e. not caregiving, like you know, we know how we can care for ourselves. Like we know what to do, right? But um, all of that changes. It's hard to think clearly, maybe is the way to put it when you're in the midst of the caregiving experience. So I just
Yeah, I
wanted
think
to
you're right.
throw those in. I mean, does those make sense to you?
Yeah, yeah, Matt. I think what happens is that when you take on this role as a caregiver, for most of us, it's completely out of our scope. We've never done it. We're thrown into something we've never done before, and it is overwhelming. So all of a sudden, our days are so full, and we stop noticing if we slide into some of these feelings or these habits. It happens slowly over time, and that's why it's dangerous because it's sneaky. Becoming isolated, you just don't wake up one day and all of a sudden not talk to people, but very slowly you talk to people less and less, so you start feeling lonelier and lonelier.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think people need to notice is that there are signs, but you have to pay attention.
Right. Yeah, and it just can be hard to pay attention. So let's talk about those signs because I want to touch on signs and
Mhm.
I want to touch on causes as well. But like for the purpose of today's discussion, I feel like the causes, we're trying to help people walk away with something they can use if they are feeling isolated or if they are isolated or feeling lonely. So the causes are maybe down the list a little bit in terms of importance, in my view, for the purpose of this conversation. So what are some of these signs, though? Because you're right, like it happens oftentimes sort of in slow motion. Um,
Yeah.
it I mean, maybe not always. There are cases if there's some sort of like acute health issue that makes you a caregiver, then it can happen quick, of course, but oftentimes it does sort of happen incrementally. So what are some of these signs? Like what, like signs, and when I'm saying signs, I'm thinking like what are these things, what are these subtle little things that maybe we're doing or not doing, um, that could sort of be an indicator to ourselves
Hmm.
that, you know, we're either becoming isolated or feeling lonely or both. What are some of
Right.
these signs like that come to mind for you, the
Sure.
common
So
ones?
I think that first, you want to realize that when we're thrown into this role, we're hyper focused on the person we're caring for, and we stop paying attention so much to our own actions or habits. So, some of the things you want to ask yourself, have I started avoiding social interaction? Not necessarily on purpose, but somebody will call and ask you to do something, and you say, "Oh, not today," or maybe another time. Do you start feeling when you are with people like I should be home, I shouldn't be here. This makes me
Mm,
nervous to not be with the person I'm caring for. So those are two of the things that come to mind. Um, it also can be when you're out with people that you normally interact with, you might notice that just being with other people is tiring to you. Like all of a sudden, just like, oh, so exhausting to be interacting with other people because maybe because you're tired. But these are some of the little signs that you could pay attention to. Are there any signs of anxiety, any
mm,
any tension that comes up when you're with people or even think about going out? So those
mm,
are the kind of things, and I think it's a good idea to slow down and ask yourself these questions. Am I leaning in this direction
mhm,
toward either isolation or feeling lonely?
mm. A lot to unpack there. So the first piece that you were talking about there around sort of I forget exactly the words you used, but you get invited to something by a friend, or maybe it's a work function or a work colleague,
Mhm.
what have you, um, and you're declining politely, of course. No, I can't today, or I can't next Tuesday, or whatever. There's this line though, right? And maybe I'm sort of going full circle here, but saying no is okay, right? I guess is my point,
Sure,
right? And
sure,
sort of doing what you feel like is in your best interest or what you want to do in that moment, or maybe not doing what you don't want to do is another way to say it socially, right? So
sure.
so that where is that line, right? Because that's something I struggled with as uh, a sandwich generation caregiver, um, a generation caregiver who, you know, we still have, we had lots of friends, we had an active social life, all of that. So,
Hmm.
um,
I think it is about balance, Matt. I completely understand. I'm all for quiet time alone, but I also think you have to be aware that too much of that can lead to total isolation before you realize it. So it's
mm,
a matter of checking in with yourself and saying, okay, I said I can't go. Why? And if you really need time alone, do it and listen to your gut. But if you're just avoiding it for the reasons we talked about, that um, it makes me nervous when I'm talking to people all of a sudden, I wonder why that is.
mm,
These little sort of reminders or ticklers when you're asking yourself, why? Why am I saying no? And if you decide to say no, great. That's okay. But just be
mm,
aware of how many times you are saying no.
mm, mm. Okay. Yeah, I can see. So all roads lead back to the question why, I guess.
Mhm.
Uh, because that was something I felt it was just kind of a constant sort of tug of war in my own personal experience. Because I, I did feel tired. I was,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and like it's just it's all a tangled web, I guess. And
Hmm.
I guess the if you if you were to boil it all down though, um, I think reading, you didn't use these words, but being curious with yourself,
Yeah.
and actually asking the question is maybe, um, you know, an important sort of thing to note and try,
Yeah.
which in and of
Love it.
itself can be hard, right? Just because you're on autopilot, or at least I was half the time, just more than half
Yes.
the time. So what about like self-talk is another sign, um, you know,
Yeah.
and like not the nice kind. Um, is that a sign of, you know, in some way a sign of sort of loneliness or
Yeah. And
being
you
cut
can
off?
take that in all kinds of directions. People who say, well, I'm exhausted. I probably don't look great to go out, and no one's gonna, want to talk to me anyway. Or I haven't spoken to people in so long that I've lost connections with people, so I don't know where to start. All of these things keep building as you keep telling yourself either, you don't know the people as well as you used to, or you've missed out on so much, um, or you might feel guilty. I mean, there's all kinds of negative things that can come in. And once again, it's just like noticing, oh my gosh, I'm doing that again. Why?
Yeah,
Why am I talking that way about myself or to myself?
yeah. Um, and you just hit on something else that I want that's sort of woven in there because as we say often in these sessions, you know, it's an emotional stew, right? We're not necessarily just really not ever kind of feeling just one thing at a time, right? So sort of there's anxiety about um, doing stuff outside of caregiving or not doing stuff outside of caregiving, but there's also, for me, there was lots of guilt, right? It wasn't like
Mm,
I just felt if I were doing something, I would feel guilty that I weren't, um, you know, being an attentive caregiver, right? So, what would you say to someone? What would you say to guilty Matt, the caregiver?
well, you know what? You can't join someone in their situation hoping to help them.
Mm,
So, the idea that what we need to do is stay as close and, there's this fuzzy line. You want to be compassionate and empathetic and caregiving, but you start putting yourself in their position so much that you're both down there. And
mm,
then, you have to help people from a place of strength and replenishment. That's the way it always works. And this idea that if we're doing something else that is either feeling good to us and that's bad, we just have to turn that around in our heads and realize that I'm doing this with the
mm,
intention of replenishing and getting strong so that when I go
Mhm.
back, I'm better.
Right, right. Okay, and then yeah, I love that, and we'll get to, that brings up another point that I think I'll save for uh, a couple of minutes here when we get into the coping strategies. Um, so those are some of the common signs, right? And then, there are other sort of, particularly when we get to when we think about isolation on its own, there are, some more obvious, right? If someone lives in a rural area and they
Mm,
live alone and um, don't have transportation or whatever it may, there are other sort of, they're more than sign, they're just sort of obvious factors, contributing factors, right?
hmm.
But I think so much of the hard stuff in caregiving is in sort of the gray area. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, and I feel like the signs we've talked about here are sort of certainly fit that bill, and which is why I'm glad we talked about them. But just real quick, like when I just one obvious potential cause of isolation is something I just mentioned, right? Like location and,
Hmm.
access to transportation, stuff like that, right? But when we think about whether it's isolation or loneliness, what are some of the other causes, really quickly, Sheila, before we get into the coping strategies?
Yeah, well, I think what I hear a lot is that there's not enough time. I don't have enough time. I've got appointments to make. I've got schedules. I've got things to do with the house. And by the way, no one in my family is helping me. So I'm not going, I don't have time to do this. We already talked about feeling guilty. We also, some of the causes of sort of breaking away from other people is, sometimes we perceive that others don't appreciate or understand our situation.
Hmm.
And they may be judging us for doing it a certain way or not doing things that we should be doing. So there's all kinds of emotions and
Hmm.
ideas that come in our heads as caregivers, and this will cause you to isolate, and then sort of that can lead to loneliness.
Yeah, yeah. And you just hit, like, for me, they were guilt was a big one. Um, Sort of fear of judgment was a big one. So you're hitting all the high notes there in my experience. And I want to. We have about 10 minutes left. I want to spend the bulk of that time getting getting into strategies that we can use in our day to day to sort of combat these things. But the impact, though, before we get there, is real,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
For mental health impact, physical health impact, right? Can you just talk for a minute
Yeah,
about that?
it comes down to stress, Matt. When your stress levels are high, you've got hormones going through your body, your inflammatory system, you've got lots of inflammation going on, your immune system is affected. It could cause you to gain or lose weight. Certainly your mood changes. I don't know if you had this. You could be way down in the dumps or be anxious or irritable.
Hmm.
And all of those things, with all of that stuff going on in your body, leads you to a higher risk of a lot of chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease and stroke. So this is why so many times we see caregivers who end up getting sick or sicker than the person they're caring for. So it's
Hmm.
so important to pay attention to this and then get some strategies to take care of it and hit it off. Hit
Mm.
it, what do they say? Hit it.
Tie
Hmm.
it off.
Tie it off. Okay.
I I don't know.
I was trying to
uh,
think of an old-fashioned way to talk about that.
Nip it in the bud.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Grandma. That was one of my grandmother's other sayings, as I'm sure it was for many. But nip it in the bud. So let's talk about strategies.
Mm,
We've talked about what they are, sort of potential causes, signs, importantly, and then really importantly, um, we've just underscored the notion that the risks to physical health, mental health, are real here, and that's not to be hyperbolic or anything, like they're real, but there are things that we can do as caregivers to combat them. So let's talk about some of those things. And the
mhm.
first, um, that is super simple, but and seems silly to say almost, but we mean it. But like getting up and actually getting ready for the day, showering, getting dressed, you know, tapping back into that sort of quote unquote standard routine, right? Even something as simple as that can be a benefit here, right?
Yeah, it sets the stage and it sets the stage for self-care. You need some time to take care of yourself. It seems really simple. And of course, we would think, of course, I'll take a shower. But how often, as a caregiver, do you wake up and you wake up to a crisis or something that has to be done? And then an hour later, you say, oh, I haven't taken a shower yet. Oh, it's okay. I'll wait till later on. And
Hmm.
that's the kind of thing you have to watch out for. Take care of what needs to be taken care of, but then get your shower in and take care of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm cosign 100%. Something else that I know you talk a lot about, Sheila, in your day-to-day work with caregivers, but getting outside is another
Hmm.
way to, even in small doses, and that goes across the board, by the way, like small doses add up to meaningful impact. You may
Hmm.
not feel like, getting outside for 2 minutes does anything to you, but it does, right? So like
Absolutely.
I know you're a huge proponent of breathing that fresh air, but that's certainly something that should be on this list.
Yeah. And if you live in a city, open the window. If you're not going to get in the elevator and go downstairs or wherever you live, get some fresh air into the home. And if it takes just opening a window and smiling at the sunshine for 30 seconds, it can do a tremendous amount.
Hmm. Same with moving your body, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, going for a walk, um, even if it's just down to the mailbox, something
Yeah.
small and regular pays dividends.
People
Uh,
don't even realize, Matt, that exercise can mean standing up, putting your arms up in the air, and taking a deep breath. Okay,
mm,
it sounds really like it's not enough. It's a lot more than just sitting. So,
yeah.
these little tiny things.
I love it. I love it. And just as we're sort of going through this list here, if there are things that work for you, please share. You can use the chat button in the bottom of your console. Would love to hear and share with the group. Um, but what about pets? I mean,
Pets are always great in
kind
my mind. I don't know.
yeah. But like,
Um,
what? Well, I mean, not everyone are pet people for sure.
yeah.
You know, but like. Even something like a robotic pet, they sell like Joy for All Pets is a company that makes these, oftentimes for care recipients, but I've seen caregivers use them too. Um, Things like
Yeah.
that, right?
The point is anything that can soothe you, that can lower your stress levels, for people who do enjoy pets, it's about, the warmth and the comfort and it's soothing. And it doesn't have to be a pet then. Whatever soothes you. For some people, it could be a hobby of some sort. But
Hmm.
yeah, animals can definitely be a great source of comfort.
Yeah. But now, so on the uh, serious isn't the right word, but like talking to professionals is something that
Mhm.
should be on this list, and something if you're isolated or feeling lonely, absolutely speaking with whether it's your doctor first, but ultimately getting to a licensed professional to talk with them about what you're feeling or the fact that you are isolated, right? That should
Mhm.
be, should have probably been number one on the list. Um,
Yeah, anybody you can talk to, and certainly a professional would be great. If that's not feasible for you, friends, connect with someone that you trust. If you're a part of the Carallel family, you can always call a Carallel advocate and chat with us.
mhm.
So it's about checking in with someone.
Yeah. And support group is another option there.
Mhm.
And I say that as someone who I was very reluctant to personally to try support groups. I didn't for lots of different reasons that I won't go into here. I just for whatever reason, like I was just reluctant. Now I will say I found two very good caregiving friends as I think of them. They're still friends today, even though all of our caregiving is done. Um, but as a result of me trying support groups, right? I didn't
Mm.
never really got hit my full stride personally with the support groups that I tried. Um, but I in the course of just exploring that option for myself, I met these two people. So
Isn't that interesting, Matt?
yeah,
That's a really good point. There's always a side effect, I think. And that's what I see too. It's not necessarily what you think you're going to get out of it, but sometimes there's a little benefit that you wouldn't have expected.
yeah, yeah, agreed. Okay, we're almost at time, so I want to wrap up. But
Mm.
these are all little things that you can do in small doses without too much effort that really will over time have an impact uh, on how you're feeling when it comes to loneliness. A couple of things. I'm going to ask Tiffany, we have backstage. Tiffany, if you could drop the link into the chat. We have an article that covers a lot of what we've been talking about here in the Carallel app. So thank you, Tiffany. She just dropped the link in. If you click on that link, that will take you to the Carallel app. If it's the first time that you're visiting, you'll need to um, you'll need to have your member ID from your health plan or your work email to register. It takes just a minute. It's really quick. And there's lots of other great stuff in there as well. And the second piece of uh, housekeeping here at the end is I just wanted to drop our schedule in here as we're talking about our sharing some last thoughts here for today's discussion. We'll be meeting again in May, and we'll be talking about navigating insurance denials and appeals, which is obviously a really important topic that affects a lot of people. But Sheila, on loneliness and isolation, what would you leave the group with today?
I want to make sure that everybody knows that it really does take a village. And the more you can support yourself with other people, even if just emotional support is tremendously helpful. And I would really encourage you to pay attention to the signs and ask yourself why you're doing things or notice when you're maybe sliding into some habits that might lead to isolation or loneliness. And keep in mind that you have to stay strong and replenish yourself in order to be your best for the one that you're caring for.
I love it. I love it. So mine would be to unbottle. I'm not sure if I've shared this word before. I don't even know if it's actually a word. But in the middle of my caregiving experience, I had someone tell me that I needed to unbottle, which meant this was someone I had come to know and trust and was helping me through, through caregiving. And I had a tendency to keep everything inside. So if I was feeling lonely or frustrated or whatever I was feeling, I was keeping it in. I was bottling it
Mm,
up in her words. And one day she just looks at me and says, "You need to unbottle, just
that's great.
unbottle."
I love it.
So that would be my final thought here is you know is talking about what you're feeling or what you're dealing with gonna overnight make you not feel lonely or get you connected when you're not connected? No, it won't, but it's a habit um, that needs to start with one time, just sharing how you're feeling. And sharing might be writing something, it might be talking to your friend on the phone, it might be talking to your doctor. Just anyone letting it out is sort of, I feel like a really important first step. So that would be my final thought for today's discussion. Unbottle, and
Love it.
it's easier said than done, but do your best to unbottle. So with that, we're 3 minutes over. I hope you found this helpful. Any questions? Just reply to your registration email, and we will respond personally. Sheila, thanks as always.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for being here. Have a good day. Bye now.
Bye-bye.